So when mutations were discovered back in the early 1900s, they got quite excited about that, especially when they discovered that radiation can induce mutations, because mutations were then thought, well, there's a mechanism for evolution to create new features. So they embarked on a program of breeding of fruit flies after irradiating them. So they irradiated them with gamma rays and induced mutations. And this is the little ferment flies you get when you leave some fruit out on the bench, and you get the little tiny flies flying around. They're Drosophila ferment flies, and they've been used for laboratory experiments for 100 years. And so they irradiated these flies expecting to make superflies. And they did that for many years, and they never got anything other than a defective fly. So they got ones without wings and ones without legs and ones with extra antennae and all sorts of defective flies, but never got superflies.
But they genuinely thought they were going to produce
they
some
genuinely
sort of
thought they were going to supply. They were going to prove evolution basically by breeding these flies with irradiation and mutating them and making them into demonstrating how evolution progresses.
And what do you think led them to think that the idea of mutations was going to do that?
Well, modern genetics had found that the features in living things are based on our genes. And so you need to find a way of getting new genes to create the new features. So this became well known, and it became a crisis for evolution. And then they discovered mutations. This is how they get the new features. And because the mutation is a new feature in a sense of a fruit fly without wings is different,
Yes.
But you don't put wings on fruit flies by mutations. You can just take them off. So you destroy the information, you don't create it. And then they progressed to things like breeding of crops, so wheat and things like that, irradiated wheat and irradiated different flowers and things like that.
Thinking that they'd get a different outcome to the flowers?
Hoping for some greatly improved features in the wheat or the flour or whatever. And you get some useful features, like, for example, dwarf crops that are short, don't tend to fall over in the wind. When there's wind and rain, wheat can fall over and then lodge, and then you can't harvest it. So short wheat has a benefit for the farmer. And you can get short wheat by mutation breeding because you destroy some stuff that needs to be tall. So and say, for example, the colour of flowers. So it's because the flowers are determined, the colour of the flowers is determined by pigments, and there's various pigments. If you knock out one of the pigments, you change the colour of the flower. So you can get some interesting horticultural features by mutation breeding. But in every case, you're breaking something. You're not actually making something. And this is what it was hoped, that they'd have a mechanism for making things. But mutations don't make things, they break things.
And so do you think, Don, that when people hear that a mutation has changed something, maybe it's beneficial or it's just different, that you sort of automatically think that means
evolution's happening.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not. People are being misled. Well, probably don't know enough about it to understand that it's actually a downhill change, whereas we need serious uphill change to explain evolution.
And why do we need this serious uphill change?
Well, we go back to our one book of information in the bacterium versus 1,000 books in a human. Yeah. So all those extra books are for all those extra features that we have that they don't have. So there's no mechanism for creating all that new specific information for all those features. Mutations just don't cut it.
And yet it's hanging on this, in a sense.
True. There's no other mechanism.
Just in case anyone's still in doubt, Don, do you have another example of a beneficial mutation that's actually still breaking down something?
Well, the classic one in the textbooks is sickle cell anemia, which folk in Africa, if they have this, they tend to be resistant to malaria. So, here's an example of a beneficial mutation. But anemia is a disease. So sickle cell anemia is a disease.
Okay.
So it's a disease that actually makes you somewhat resistant to malaria. So if you have one gene which has this mutation on it, you have this sickle cell trait, it's called. But if you, as an athlete, try to run a marathon, you have 37 times the risk of dying of sudden death.
So So you're resistant to malaria, but if you start running, there's a problem.
There's a problem. So would you like that beneficial mutation?
Okay.
So under the certain circumstances, that mutation prevents people getting malaria, but it's actually breaking something. The DNA for hemoglobin has one letter error in it, in the wrong spot, and it results in your blood cells being sickle-shaped instead of donut-shaped. And because of your sickle cell-shaped blood cells, malaria doesn't like you.
Okay.
And that's why you're somewhat resistant. But you're still breaking something. And it's a bit like saying if you're a smoker and you want to avoid gangrene, just chop your legs off.
Okay.
So it's that sort of thing. It's breaking something which happens to be somewhat helpful under certain circumstances.
We've established how the textbooks aren't giving us the information about mutations and how they break things. I know that my students in high school have appreciated Evolution's Achilles Heels documentary and how that brings to light some of the information we're talking about. You're actually in it. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Evolution Achilles Heels, a documentary, there's a number of PhD scientists are interviewed in the documentary. It's very powerful and it's very suitable for particularly high school, senior high school students, university students. It deals with mutations, natural selection, and a lot of other things like cosmic evolution, which is the evolution of the universe. But it's very comprehensive, very viewable. The book's got more detail. So the documentary is available by streaming. So there's a great opportunity to view this documentary. We are making it available as a free download for 7 days.
And the link will be in the description below. Don, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jess.